Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. My name is Tyler, and today we're going to be giving you a little bit of a trade deadline primer from an Orioles specific perspective. There's been some rumors swirling. We've got just a few days left until that trade deadline hits. No big moves have happened just yet, so it felt like a good time to kind of dig into some things, what the Orioles need, who they could maybe target, and maybe what I hope to be the outcome of the trade deadline, which is, the last chance for the Baltimore Orioles of 2024 to improve their odds of winning a World Series this season, which, this team feels like maybe even in a better position than a season ago to do that. So we're going to dig into that today. But before we get into that, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor for this week's episode, and it is, of course, Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. And then when the game's over, you can head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. So head to the website today. That's betonline.ag to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. That's promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV for 50% free bet credit on your first deposit of up to $250. Bet Online, the game starts here. Thanks to Bet Online for sponsoring this week's episode. So, back to the trade deadline. So, just so everybody knows, let's level set right now. The trade deadline, we all understand what it is, but it has changed in recent years. There is no longer the two different trade deadlines of the non-waiver and the waiver trade deadline. There's now just one trade deadline. We did see, however, last year that the Angels specifically had kind of gone in at the trade deadline, the trade deadline, when they had Shohei Ohtani, kept Shohei Ohtani, went and got, I think, Lucas Giolito, a couple other pieces. Things fell apart for them in August. And then they used, I think, the second half of August to just put everybody on waivers that they got. That was expensive, essentially. So I think Giolito got moved again. But anyway, teams can do that, but it's different from a trade. You're kind of just waiving everybody to basically get salary off the books. And there are some thoughts out there that the trade deadline should be moved back at least 2 weeks to the middle of August, because sort of an issue that the league has right now is that there are too many teams that are contending for a playoff spot. Now they have the extra wild card, that it disincentivizes selling, because you could get in just like the Diamondbacks did last year with a mediocre regular season and then go on a run. So there's a lot of teams hovering around 500, within a handful of games of a playoff spot, that maybe if you move it back 2 weeks to middle of August, they'd fall out of things a little bit, be, 8 games out, and then be ready to sell like the Angels did last year. Or if you had one fewer playoff spot, obviously they would already naturally be more games out of a playoff spot. But that is for a future season. For this season, the trade deadline is on July 30th. It's a moving target. It changes every year a little bit. This year it's on July 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern. Typically, a couple trades will trickle in right after 6 p.m., but there's apparently some faxing and some paperwork stuff that, as long as that part of it is done by 6 p.m., the trades can be approved and such up to, I think, about an hour after that 6 p.m. Deadline. So that is what the trade deadline is. All trades have to be done at the major league level by the end of July, or I'm sorry, July 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern. So be aware of that. And this is really just pertaining to players on the 40-man roster. So you may see other trades made beyond July that might involve, minor leaguer for minor leaguer or something like that, or, so-and-so that got waived and unclaimed and then it gets traded for cash considerations or something like that. There could be those kinds of moves, but as far as like the big substantial playoff changing moves, this is the deadline that we have to be worried about. If you're listening to a baseball specific podcast, you probably know that, but it just feels good to kind of like get everybody on the same level there. Now, for the Orioles specifically, again, if you're listening to this podcast, I think you probably already know what the Orioles are after, but I do think that there is one position or role out there that apparently the Orioles are chatting about. that is a little bit surprising. At least it is to me, but it might not be to you. So if we dig into the Orioles roster, I think the first couple needs are pretty self-explanatory. They need rotation help. The Orioles went into the season, I think, feeling they had pretty good depth in the rotation. Corbin Burns, they got at the beginning of February to be the ace. He's been fantastic. Started the All-Star game and has been kind of a horse so far. That's been great. Grayson Rodriguez came into the season healthy, had the one IL stint, but it didn't seem like it was anything serious. Has largely been very good for the Orioles. Has had a couple like very bad starts, but apart from like those one or two horrific starts, he's been great. So that's been good. Beyond that, question marks. We knew Kyle Bradish coming this season was going to be delayed with the UCL issue. He did pitch, and when he pitched, he was fantastic, but it was a ticking time bomb the whole time. And unfortunately, he did have to have Tommy John surgery in mid-June. So he's been out, will be out for the rest of the season, will be out for a lot of next season. John Means, same situation. He had gotten pushed back his season because of some shoulder stuff that was residual impacts of his rehab from his first Tommy John surgery back in early 2022. Remember, he came back very late last season, pitched well, although his peripheral numbers were not great, and then did not pitch in the postseason because he was having some effects, I think, in his shoulder, even though the UCL or the Tommy John is an elbow injury, an elbow surgery rather. He was having some issues from the rehab and the strain and all that stuff. We know John Means came back this season a little bit after Bradish did. Again, he pitched well as well. Then he exited a game, and he has had to have his second Tommy John surgery. He will be out all this season. Potentially is done as an Oriole. You know, maybe they come to some agreement with him that they could get him back next year on the cheap, but his season is done. And then Tyler Wells, we know he kind of pushed into rotation work because Bradish and Means started the season on the IL. Wells was struggling early on, went on the IL. It was very, ambiguous what the issue was with him. We heard his rehab wasn't going great. And then the news came that he was getting Tommy John as well. I'm sorry, his is not a Tommy John. I think his is an internal brace surgery, which is slightly different, has a slightly shorter rehab process. So he might be back earlier next season. And I think the Orioles would probably prefer him to be in a relief role rather than a starting role. But anyway, when you have three guys have significant elbow injuries, that naturally is going to deteriorate your starting rotation depth and performance. So as a result, Dean Kramer, who has been in the rotation all year, had about a month IL stint himself. He's been in there and he's kind of been doing Dean Kramer things, which are, as we say on this podcast a lot, are very good number 5 starter things. They are not very good number 3 starter things. So that's been an issue for the Orioles. Albert Suarez, I think, has been kind of a lifesaver this year for them. He's pitched in the bullpen. He's pitched as a starter. He's not always dominant, but he seems like he always gets through 5, 6 solid innings, which I think for a 34, 35-year-old coming back from Asia after so many years, I think you have to be ecstatic with what Albert Suarez has provided you, given all the context. And then Cade Povich has stepped up as a rookie and made a handful of starts. 2 of them have been pretty terrible, but I think the other 5 have been pretty good. Again, he's a rookie. We've kind of seen this with all of the Orioles' young players, pitchers, hitters. They come up and are kind of bad initially, and then they work through those growing pains and get much better. Povich could be in a similar situation. However, as of this writing, he is back in AAA Norfolk. They demoted him right before the All-Star break. And then the Orioles had an off day on the first Monday out of the All-Star break. They didn't need 5 starters right away. So that's kind of the pitching situation in the starting situation in particular. It's not great. And the Orioles don't have any obvious internal solutions right now. I think they've got a guy like Bruce Zimmerman could come in and I think give you a spot start, and you probably feel fine about that. But you certainly don't want to give the ball to Bruce Zimmerman every 5th day. He's been on the 40-man roster for 2 years now, has not really been used, hasn't been used this season at all. So I think that kind of tells you what they're thinking about in regards to Bruce Zimmerman. So naturally, they need to make a trade there. That was a very long-winded way to explain the starting pitching situation. They need a starting pitcher. In the bullpen is I think in a better spot than the rotation. Craig Kimbrell's been quite good as the closer, but I think you and I would admit that it's a little bit shaky at times. Similar for Yenier Cano. And then it's kind of a laundry list of guys that on certain days you feel good about. Cionel Perez, Jacob Webb, Keegan Aiken, Brian Baker. Some days they look fantastic, and other days they look like they shouldn't be on a major league mound. Cole Irvin's your long man. I think that's a fine role for him. It hasn't gone great for him. The results have not been fantastic, but he's given them length. And typically your long man's coming in a blowout one way or the other. And you just need to survive, and Irvin has done that. Birch Smith has been intriguing. All of a sudden, came over from the Marlins earlier in the year. He's been good through a couple of outings. Vinny Natoli, I don't believe he's pitched just yet. And then Danny Coulomb is on the 60-day IL. They are expecting him back in September, I believe, and that'll be a huge boost there. But and Coulomb's been arguably their best reliever, maybe non-Craig Kimbrell addition there, but Coulomb will be huge when he comes back. If you look at statistically, and I did want to do that, what I did was I looked at pitching stats from June 15th through now. June 15th is the first day after Kyle Bradish went on the IL. He didn't have his Tommy John just yet, had that a couple days later. And this is for all of the Orioles pitching staff. So starters included, bullpen included. The Orioles are 24th in the league in WAR, Fangraphs WAR, which is, not necessarily the best, method for measuring pitcher success, but they're the 24th in the league. There's only 30 teams, so that's not good. Moving over to ERA, they are 27th with a 5.08 ERA. And then fielding independent pitching, they are 24th, 4.67 FIP. It's not good. K per 9, they are striking out 8.59 per 9 innings, which is about middle of the pack. And walks per 9, they're a little bit lower than that. 3.38 walks per 9, which is 21st in the league. So it's not great. If I dice this up by starting pitching, I think things get worse. No, they get a little bit better. That was just for walks per 9 rather. Yeah, they get worse. So they're 0.3 FWAR for the starting pitchers, and the starting pitcher ERA is 5.09. And then if we look at relief pitcher ERA is 5.06. So both have been quite bad. The Orioles need a pitcher on. They need a pitcher in the rotation, I think, at least, and they need at least an arm in the bullpen. We've talked about some internal solutions. They don't really have them for the rotation. The bullpen, there might be an ability to transition some of the prospects like Chase McDermott into a bullpen piece for September, but I don't think you feel great about a rookie pitching high leverage innings. So let's look at. Well, now first let's also talk about the other position that they may be looking at, and that is center field. Not an everyday center fielder necessarily, although that could be on the table. But it's been rumored for a bit that the Orioles are looking for a right-handed hitting center fielder. Obviously, the Orioles outfield is very left-handed heavy. Cowser, Mullins, both lefties full-time. Santander is a switch. And then you have Austin Hayes that hits right-handed and hits lefties pretty well, but Kjerstad's left-handed. Who else do we even have here? Let's look at their depth chart while I'm here. Yeah. O'Hearn plays some outfield. He's left-handed. Jorge Mateo can technically play center field. He's right-handed, but obviously the only everyday right-handed hitter they have in the outfield is Austin Hayes. Santander kind of counts. Neither one of them are center field options. So when you're platooning, which is kind of what they wanted to do, you don't have an option against a left-handed starter. They've been putting Cowser in there because he has been better against lefties than Mullins has, but neither one is exactly ideal. So the Orioles want a right-handed hitting center fielder. And again, there's no obvious internal solution for that. They would have to go outside the organization to do that. And related to one of the rumors we're going to talk about, they potentially have to free up some space on the Major League roster to make that happen. So let's get into a couple of the rumors here. Now that we understand what the Orioles need. The first rumor that I want to talk about is sort of a surprising one, and that's that the Orioles and Phillies have reportedly discussed a trade that would send Cedric Mullins to Philadelphia. So, as we just said, the Orioles, if they want to get a right-handed hitting center fielder, they likely need to offload somebody. Now, they could demote somebody. They could demote Cowser. They could demote Kjerstad. However, Cowser's been on the team all year. Yes, the batting has not been as good since it was in April, but the defense has been very good. He has flexibility that he can play center, left, right, which is great. He's probably the only one on the team I think you can say that about. Obviously, Mullins can go get anything, but the arm isn't there. Cowser has the arm, has the range that he can play every single outfield position, which is the only one on the Orioles roster that can do that. The Phillies have a desire for center field defense, which Cedric Mullins certainly would provide to them. This rumor, I should say, comes from Jim Bowden talking to I think a Philadelphia area radio station, or maybe it was on Sirius XM. I can't remember. He was taking a radio interview, and I mentioned a handful of names that the Phillies or that the Phillies have reached out about, and Mullins was part of that. Now, that's an important distinction because it's not the Orioles looking to offload Cedric Mullins necessarily. It is the Phillies trying to find a solution to their problem and calling teams that they find may have a solution for them. Mullins, why not? Why not ask about Cedric Mullins? The Orioles have a ton of outfielders, a ton of young outfielders. Mullins has a year of control, so that's a nice little bonus. We know the bat's not great, but the Phillies offense is fantastic. You could bat ninth for us, play Gold Glove defense in center field, and we're still feeling pretty good about that. So I get it from the Phillies perspective. And from the Orioles perspective, you are probably beyond Cedric Mullins' prime in terms of offensive ability, and you potentially have a solution to your center field job against right-handed pitching in Colton Cowser. Maybe you don't, and I know some people are. I think Cowser is a divisive figure in terms of on-field performance. I think personality-wise, everybody seems to love Cowser. He's sort of a fan favorite with the pastor and all that stuff. But obviously, his offensive performance has not been fantastic since April. But neither is Mullins. So if you're going to start somebody, I think you probably are preferring to start Cowser at this point. So it makes sense there. You have the heavy side of the platoon sorted out. Now you need the right-handed hitter to face the left-handed pitcher. You can go find that somehow. I know Kevin Pillar is a name that's come up. Not a rumor we're going to talk about today because it hasn't really gained any steam in months. But Kevin Pillar's had a great season. I think it's understood he's retiring after the year. He just hit his 10 years. That could be a fit there. But the opposite side of this Mullins trade is the Orioles need to get something back. What are the Phillies, a team that is in contention, I think a World Series favorite potentially in the whole league, definitely in the NL. What are they going to give up to the Orioles, who are maybe their counterpart in the AL? That would be interesting for the Orioles to offload Cedric Mullins. That would be the issue I would find there is, okay, are you getting just a middling prospect, a nothing prospect that's going to go into the void and you never hear from again? Is that really worth it? I don't know. Now, the Phillies have a very good bullpen that potentially there is some surplus parts there that the Orioles could take on. But again, the Phillies, even though you got a good bullpen, that doesn't mean you're in a position to trade off your bullpen guys. You have your bullpen is stellar. Let's keep it stellar. And we're not necessarily interested in that. So for the Orioles, would it just be offloading a guy to, you remove some salary. Mullins' salary isn't humongous by, major league standards, but you offload some salary. You open up innings to bring in that right-handed bat. And maybe you take that middling prospect you get from the Phillies and kind of flip it immediately for a rental type of outfielder piece, like maybe a Kevin Pillar would warrant. I think Kevin Pillar has been quite good this year and obviously comes with a reputation of great defense. So there could be more teams clamoring. You got to do more than that, but it at least bridges that gap. So maybe there's something there. What I will say, though, and the final point I'll make about it is just that it would be a little bit odd for a contending team like the Orioles to take the guy that has basically been their everyday center fielder. I mean, Mullins plays most games. He sits against good left-handed pitching, but he plays against righties. He pinch hits or comes in as a defensive sub or a pinch runner basically every game. He's playing every single day in some capacity. It would be very odd to send that guy away, which I think is a common thread through a lot of rumors I hear from fans, specifically kind of just like bandying things about. That includes things like Ryan Mountcastle, Austin Hayes. Well, Austin Hayes is a little bit different, but Mountcastle and Hayes are interesting because these are guys that have been on the roster all year. Ramon Urias, I guess, fits into that. These are guys that have been in the roster all season long, and it would be different for the Orioles to look to trade those kinds of guys in the middle of a pennant run like this. Typically, you're still going to do the traditional thing of trading your prospects, packaging your prospects to get a major league ready piece. That's just what you do. And you can sort everything out. You can demote a guy. Like I said, you can demote Kjerstad or whatever to make the room, or maybe Kjerstad's part of a trade or something like that. But it would be different for the Orioles to subtract from the big league squad in the middle of a really good season. That's more of a off-season thing you do to reshuffle the deck. Everybody can kind of take a breath and see where they're at and go from there. And it gives the Orioles the time to say, okay, we're trading a Mullins And now we can kind of evaluate and see, do we really feel good about Cowser in center field every day? Or are we just were we caught up in the moment, something like that? So the odds I think of Mullins going are limited, but it was at least interesting and I wanted to note it here. Let's talk about some more likely things, although I think this is only slightly more likely, is Mason Miller is apparently conservatively on the trading block for the Oakland, soon to be Sacramento, eventually Las Vegas Athletics. Mason Miller's been really exciting this season. Obviously, the hardest throwing pitcher in baseball right now. Strikes out a ton of guys. He has a 2.21 ERA in 34 games, has 15 saves, which is, a deflated number because the A's are not very good this year. His whip is under 1 at .836, 70 strikeouts in 40 and 2/3 innings. A fantastic talent, is not due to hit free agency until after the 2029 season. So you'd have him under control for 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. You have him for 5 seasons. He's a relief pitcher. You have him for 5 seasons. It's going to be expensive to get Mason Miller. On top of that, he's had arm injuries, and he is throwing over 100 miles per hour every time out. That, to me, feels like a recipe for disaster. Now, you may get through the 2024 season okay, but beyond that, it's a little bit scary. Now, what I will say is if he doesn't get hurt, then next year, the Orioles would have a bullpen of Mason Miller, Craig Kimbrell, and Felix Bautista. Suddenly, Craig Kimbrell is your 7th inning guy. That feels better than 9th inning. And I say Craig Kimbrell because he does have a team option, I think, for next year for $12.5 million. And while that might be a lot to pay a 7th inning guy in that situation, it's palatable because you wouldn't be paying your 8th inning or 9th inning guys very much. Bautista and Miller would be on cost controlled deals, and both of them throwing 100 miles per hour. Now it's 3 righties. Maybe that's not ideal. But anyway, that's pretty exciting. But is it worth the trade that it's going to take to get a guy with 5 years of control? I'm not so sure. And I'm also not so sure that the A's are going to be actively shopping a guy like that. I think they're more than welcome to be more than open to answering the phone. And if you absolutely blow them away with, 3 top 100 prospects or something, plus a couple other sweeteners, maybe you do that. If I'm the A's, I definitely do that because for the same reasons I just said, his arm is a little bit of a ticking time bomb in my brain. Maybe that makes sense for them. But from the team trading for him, that's a bit scary to me. It's just the bullpen arms are so volatile. It's not even just injury stuff. It's, it's performance stuff. Yes, he's going to throw hard. Even if he loses a year to injury, he's still going to come back and throw hard. But, the throwing hard doesn't last forever. It doesn't get guys out forever. We've seen Aroldis Chapman, who still throws hard, not as hard as he used to, obviously. Aroldis Chapman isn't good anymore. Hasn't been good for a couple years. So you never know when that turn's going to happen. And Aroldis Chapman is basically like an all-time relief arm. Is Mason Miller an all-time relief arm? Maybe, but we don't know that yet. The other part of it I would say is that there is always potential that a team that gets him could move him back to the rotation, which that would lower his velocity, but it would increase his workload overall, which, there's a give and a take there. I'm not sure what you feel better about. But Mason Miller is a name rumored to the Orioles. I think for me, it doesn't really make sense right now, given what the cost would be, but I understand why the intrigue is there. Now, a less exciting rumor out there is that the Orioles and the Cincinnati Reds have been chatting specifically about pitching. 2 right-handed pitchers, Frankie Montas and Nick Martinez. Montas would be more of a depth rotation option. Martinez would be a bullpen option. Now, for me, this is certainly not a game-changing move for the Baltimore Orioles. It doesn't make the Orioles significantly better. However, I do think the Orioles need to make a move like this. Not, it doesn't have to be Montas specifically, it doesn't have to be Martinez specifically, but the Orioles, yes, they need the high-end talent. They need the number 2 type of pitcher in the rotation, but they also need a number 5. Dean Kramer has been a little bit shaky for me. If you don't trust Cade Povich to go deep in the games and deep into the season, you need somebody. Albert Suarez, I would kind of love for him to be in the bullpen, preferably. So they need to go do some of these depth signings, maybe 2 of these kinds of depth additions. Because if you move Suarez back to the bullpen, now the bullpen is better. Now you don't have to go get as many pieces in the bullpen, but it leaves a gap. And the Orioles still have to survive this 60-game stretch to get to the playoffs. And ideally, you want to win the division. I know there's the whole thing about the layoff between regular season and postseason when you win the division, but still, ultimately, you want to win the division. You want to get those home playoff games. So that would have me a little bit worried. So the Orioles need to go do something like this. Now, Montas, you're not going to like these numbers. He's got a 4.85 ERA over 89 innings. He's had some injury stuff. His ERA plus is 88, so he's 12% below the league average there, and his FIP is 5.02. So this is not a fantastic starter by any means. This is not Frankie Montas of 2021 that finished sixth in the AL Cy Young voting with the Athletics. It's just not him. He's got a whip of 1.36, which is bad. He's giving him 8.4 hits per nine, 1.4 home runs per nine, walking 3.8 per nine, and striking out 7.3 per nine. This is a number 5 starter who you use to survive the year, and then he's probably not on your postseason roster. But if you're giving him up for a single A player that you have doubts about and is basically a lottery ticket, it's probably worth it for both sides. Nick Martinez, I find a little bit more interesting. He's got a 3.88 ERA in 28 games. However, 5 of those are his starts. He's a guy that has started some games this year. His ERA plus is 110, so he's 10% above league average. His FIP is 3.13. Really good there. Only striking out 7 per 9, 9 hits per 9. Not great. But if we look at his splits in 2024, I want to look at his splits between starting and relieving, which they should be down here somewhere. Okay. As a starter, his batting average against is 348, and his ERA is 7.36. Bad. That was in 5 starts. In 23 games as a reliever, he's got a 1.94 ERA, batting average against of 195. His strikeout numbers are still not great, only 7.6 strikeouts per 9 as a reliever, but his whip is 0.820. That to me sounds like a perfectly viable mid-inning pitcher. He's not the guy that's he's not going to get the swing and miss. He's not the guy you want on the mound in the 10th inning with the Manfred man on second base because he's going to give up a ground ball that's going to advance the runner at the very least, and it might squeak through for a single to score the run. The other thing about Martinez that's interesting, and I can look at Montas too to see if this is the case. Martinez is a $12 million player option in 2025. So there's some risk there that he will take it because that's a lot. 12 million is a lot, and bet on himself to repeat his bullpen performance and then parlay that into a, 3-year, $40 million deal or something. Who knows? I don't know what a relief pitcher would get, in the winter of 2025, 2026, but you could see that being a risk and a reason that the Reds want to move him. And if the Orioles take it on, they could say, well, look, we're taking on the prorated amount of $14 million this year and then $12 million next year. We're not giving you a whole lot for this guy. Yeah, he's a good reliever. He's not a great reliever, and he could go boom or bust. But again, that's the kind of move I think the Orioles need to make. They need to do the other things too, but Martinez and Montas make a lot of sense there. And Montas, just on his salary, he has a mutual option for next season at $20 million that a team will not pick that up, but he does have a buyout for $2 million. So again, Montas would be a rental, and Martinez maybe is a fixture for next year. If he's great, you're happy about that. If he's not, you're bummed to be paying him $12 million. Other rumor, this isn't really a rumor, but MLB Trade Rumors wrote up a thing about Kyle Stowers being kind of like the overlooked outfielder for the Baltimore Orioles, and I agree, and I've written about this before. I think this is the deadline that Stowers needs to go, not because not because not because he's bad or anything like that. There's just no room for Kyle Stowers on the 2024 Baltimore Orioles or the 2025 Baltimore Orioles. And he's not a center fielder that can bounce up and down the way Ryan McKenna did and give you pinch runner ability to hit against left-handed pitching, to play all 3 outfield positions. That's not Kyle Stowers. He's played center field in the minor leagues, but the Orioles haven't used him in center field in the big leagues, I don't think. They don't seem to be intending to do that. So given that that's not how you're viewing him, let's trade him to a Chicago White Sox, an Anaheim Angels, Los Angeles Angels, an Oakland Athletics, and give him a chance to play every day, prove he's a big leaguer, and earn some money out there versus riding the Norfolk shuttle for his option years and then getting DFA'd or sold for nothing. So Kyle Stowers to me feels like a prime candidate. He's earned it. He's deserved a chance to prove himself in the big leagues, to trade him for a relief pitcher. Again, this is not the move to get them a Kimbrel successor or solution if Kimbrel falters in the playoffs. This is, again, a depth move to get you a middle inning guy or maybe a depth type of piece. Now, these moves I'm talking about with the Reds and Kyle Stowers, they could be connected. You're not going to necessarily get these guys for nothing and trade Stowers for something else. They could be connected. But the reporting on the Reds was that they were scouting some of the Orioles low minor league players. So take that for what you will. But Stowers, he deserves to go. He's a good guy. It seems like a good guy. He has been a good guy, a good soldier, happy to bounce up and down. Well, not happy, but willing to bounce up and down. And he's performed well. His OPS is almost 800 for the Orioles this year. Give him a shot to go somewhere else and earn some money, especially with the Orioles. The prospects that are coming up. You've got Dylan Beavers coming up, Enrique Bradfield coming up. They just drafted Vance Honeycutt. You kind of at every level have these prospects that I think you view as having higher ceilings than Kyle Stowers to kind of replace what he provides you in terms of organizational depth. They can come up and down. There's more guys coming to do that. So I think I'd be more willing to trade Stowers for a middle relief piece. Again, even if it's a lesser version than a Dylan Beavers or even a Judd Fabian that I think the Orioles like a lot. I think I'd be more willing to do that. So I do think that Kyle Stowers should go because he, again, like I said, deserves a shot to prove himself to the league. And it's just a bummer to see a guy go up and down and really kind of be withheld from his full potential. All right, on to a move that is not rumored necessarily, but just popped up this week, and I think it's interesting and fits some of the needs we've talked about here. And that is that the Dodgers have designated James Paxton rather, for assignment. So Paxton is a name that's obviously been around the league for a long time. He's 35 years old, has played 11 seasons in Major League Baseball, was quite good for the Mariners early in his career, moved to the Yankees where he had some struggles in his second season there, reinvented himself in Boston a little bit, and has been solid for the Los Angeles Dodgers here, who the Dodgers always seem to have an older, aging pitcher that turns into gold out of nowhere. Now, I wouldn't say Paxton is quite there, but he's been solid for the Dodgers. 4.43 ERA in 89 and a third innings, has a 4.96 FIP and a 90 ERA plus. So the numbers are not fantastic. They are Cole Irvin-esque, if I'll be honest. But it's something the Orioles need. They need a back end rotation piece. You can't necessarily just take Irvin and put him back in the rotation because then that creates the hole in the bullpen again of a multi-inning long reliever type. Paxton being DFA'd, you'd imagine the cost is not going to be very much. Now he's got to get through waivers. Teams are going to maybe claim him before the Orioles get the chance to. If my understanding is correct, it goes in reverse order of record from worst to best through the NL first because he's a Dodger or was a Dodger, and then we'll go through the AL in the same way. So if a crummy team needs him to survive the rest of the season, maybe they get him. If a team that is only slightly worse than the Orioles wants him, they will claim him. And then the two sides, I believe, have 24 hours to work out a trade, which you would hope that if you claim him, you can work out a trade. So will Paxton get a chance to be an Oriole? I don't know, but I do think that there's a fit there. Now, what I would also think is that the Dodgers would have likely explored trade options prior to DFAing him. So they should know what the market is like out there for him already. And you would imagine if the Orioles were interested, they've already had those conversations. And given that the Orioles are very good and have a lower chance of getting him in the waiver process, they would have put their best foot forward there. And that if that did happen, it wasn't enough for the Dodgers to go that route. So What happens now? You wait to see what the process is. DFAing takes a little bit of time. There's always that DFA limbo. He could go unclaimed, and then we all look silly. And well, I guess just me because I'm the one here with the podcast talking into a microphone, but maybe the Orioles don't want him. And like I said, the numbers are not eye popping and the stuff is not eye popping. And this isn't a guy that's going, again, to be part of your playoff rotation. But I think he is a guy that helps the Orioles survive a season if they can go get him. Will they go get him? I don't know, but I felt it was worth mentioning here. And then I think finally, I want to talk on the two big left-handed pitchers that are reportedly on the market that the Orioles could make sense for. And that's Tarek Skubal and Garrett Crochet. So the Skubal rumors are a little bit more hot than the Crochet rumors. There's really been nothing on Crochet for a while now, although I think Crochet is the one that's more likely to go than Skubal, which we can talk about that. But Skubal, apparently the Orioles and Dodgers have both been in talks with the Tigers about Skubal. I think there's been rumors and reports that the Tigers have had scouts at Oriole minor league games, specifically AAA Norfolk. Now, teams have scouts at opposing teams' games all the time throughout the season, so this is not necessarily in a vacuum interesting, but given the proximity to the trade deadline and the fit that the Orioles would have for Skubal, it would make a lot of sense. Now, if I'm honest, Skubal is the name that I would love for the Orioles to go get. Why? Well, he's got years of team control left. He is not a free agent until after the 2026 season. So they'd have for 2 years plus the rest of this season. And remember, the Orioles don't necessarily have an obvious ace for 2025 just yet. Corbin Burnes is set to be a free agent. Maybe they re-sign him. Kyle Bradish is going to be recovering from Tommy John surgery deep into 2025, potentially missing the whole season. We don't know. Usually the process is 12 to 15 months on the lower end, and that would put him getting back maybe in September, but potentially not at all. You hope Grayson Rodriguez continues to take that step forward, but I don't think that in this moment you feel, oh yeah, Grayson Rodriguez can step in the shoes of Corbin Burnes, and then yeah, we feel great about everybody else in the rotation. Skubal comes in. He is now your in-house favorite to be the ace for 2025. Then you feel much better about Grayson Rodriguez behind him. And because he's not going to be expensive yet, now, yes, he's going to be going through arbitration. He's going to get a raise for sure. He's still not going to be that expensive. I think like Burnes is making like 16 million or 18 million this year or something, which is like a lot of money, clearly. But compared to what some of these free agent pitchers get, 30, 40 million or whatever, it's not exorbitant. So you could say, all right, we got Skubal in here for 10 this year. Grayson's still making peanuts. Bradish will get back at some point. And hey, let's go re-sign Corbin Burnes. Now, if you got Burnes, Skubal, Rodriguez, and Bradish at some point in 2025, that'd be going into the playoffs. You had those 4 arms. I mean, I don't know who's beating the Orioles in that setup. But even if you don't get Burnes, even if Bradish isn't healthy, you feel pretty darn good about Skubal, Rodriguez. Skubal is likely the favorite for AL Cy Young right now, in front of Burnes. He's been better than Burnes for a lot of this season. He likely, if you're going based on 2024 performance, Skubal probably was the better choice to start the All-Star game, but Burnes, obviously the veteran, has been around a long time. I get that that's kind of how that works too. Skubal, league leading 2.34 ERA over 20 starts. His winning percentage of 78.6 is the best in the American League as well. Doesn't have the most wins. I think Grayson Rodriguez actually has the most wins in the AL. 146 strikeouts over 123 innings, only 22 walks in 123 innings. That is 1.6 walks per 9, 10.7 strikeouts per 9. I mean, yeah, he's the best pitcher in the AL right now. So, of course, what does that cost to get him? Probably going to be a lot. Probably going to be a lot. I think the Orioles are likely deeming Jackson Holliday as untouchable. I get the feeling Kobe Mayo is close to that. And then I think everybody else is up for grabs. That includes Sammy Basayo, which, if I'm honest, I'm okay with. I think Basayo is obviously a fantastic talent. If he can catch in the big leagues, that is enormously valuable, even with Adley Rutschman here, because it's going to take Basayo a couple years to get here. The understanding there is that his defense is a little bit raw. It's going to take him some time. And then by that point, Rutschman's going to be closer to free agency, maybe more of a first baseman / catcher versus just catcher. Maybe there's room there for Basayo to slot in. But if Basayo is not a catcher, then the scouting reports indicate he's a first baseman, and that puts a lot of pressure on the bat to be exemplary, which all indications are that it will be, but it does lessen the value because you can get offensive value at first base much easier than you can get offensive value at catcher. But there's always that possibility, right? If he can be a catcher at the big league level and hit like he's supposed to be hitting, then you have one of the most valuable pieces in the league because catcher is just such a position devoid of offensive output that you take a guy hitting, 10% below league average, but then you put a guy in there actually it's 20% above league average. That's a really valuable asset to have. So I think Basayo's out there. I think Heston Kjerstad is up for grabs in that situation, which you feel okay about. I think because you have Cowser and you hope that some of these other guys develop, the Bradfields, the Honeycutts eventually. I think Mayo you could view as maybe a right fielder long term. So then you have Cowser and Mayo, and if you have two young, talented outfielders, then you plug in a veteran somewhere else in the outfield, and you feel pretty good about that. And that obviously alone is not going to get it done. I don't think. Kjerstad and Basayo alone are going to get it done, but those are two top, 50-ish prospects, maybe better. So you're gonna have to probably throw in two or three other interesting pieces. Likely gonna have to throw some pitching in there. You can't just give them hitters. So maybe there's a Chase McDermott thrown in, a Seth Johnson, something like that. Again, these are things the Orioles don't want to do, but to get a Skubal to give you that security, you might have to do it. Now the risk with Skubal is he doesn't have high inning counts just yet. Now he's only 27 years old, right? 27. He'll be 28 in November. 123 innings this year, 80 innings last year, 117 the year before that, 149. So he's never gone beyond 149 innings. This year he is on pace to do that. There's no indication that there's arm issues, but so even if he gets past that to 170-ish, maybe he gets there. That's not huge innings. And there's the positive of, oh, he doesn't have a ton of mileage on him. He can go forever. And there's also that he's never proven to go 190, 200 innings. So can we really count on him as an ace? At a certain point, you got to take risk. And Skubal, to me, has all the signs of a guy you want to take risk on. He's got the control, that the team control, that even if he gets hurt, you still have additional years there. And there's also there's no track record of elbow injuries to my knowledge. So Skubal is the guy I would love to get. Crochet is, I think, if you're talking about risk, is the far riskier bet. Now his numbers have been fantastic. 3.02 ERA. He leads the league in strikeouts, 150 in 107.1 innings. That's 12.6 strikeouts per nine, which again is the best among qualified pitchers. And his 2.35 FIP is the best in the league as well. So the talent is immense. He is under team control through the 2026 season as well. So you get him through 2025 and 2026 in addition to this season. And he is 25 years old. So there's, some reason to think that the runway is still there on him. He's still getting better. You can only get so much better from being a top 5 pitcher in the AL, but still, he's riskier to me because this is his first season as a starting pitcher. Last year, he threw 12.2 innings in the big leagues, was hurt the year before, and the year before that, he threw 54 and a third innings in the big leagues. Again, all of those as relief appearances. This is his first season starting Major League Baseball. Is he going to get hurt? Is he going to flame out? Is this too good to be true? Are all legitimate questions. And then there's the White Sox asks for him. The White Sox and the Orioles are familiar with one another. They were talking about Dylan Cease winter. They deemed him too expensive. They opted for Corbin Burnes instead. Yes, you got 1 year less of control than Cease, but I think performance-wise, the Orioles made the correct decision. Burnes has been better than Cease. Crochet is probably better than Cease, but there's risk there, and is the value there to trade for him. I would argue the talent is insane, and if the Orioles get Crochet, I will not be upset, but I would prefer Skubal. I just think there's less risk there. It's more of a known quantity, and the packages could be similar. Crochet is younger, but they both have the same amount of team control. And Skubal has the longer track record. So maybe he costs slightly more, but I think in general the packages are going to be similar to get him. And if I'm picking one or the other, I want Skubal. So that's really all the rumors I wanted to talk about. I know this got a little bit long-winded, so I apologize for that. I think if if I think I made it pretty evident. Skubal is who I would like the Orioles to get, and then relief, I am sort of open to anybody. I would not opt for them to get Mason Miller if they can avoid it. Obviously, great talent, but I think it's going to be not impossible, but tough to get Miller and a Skubal type in the same deadline, given the cost of it. And Miller just to me seems too risky for what the return on a reliever is. So I'd rather the Orioles try to do some lower risk bullpen pieces or potentially, go for expiring contracts and then swing big in the rotation. And then offensively, I don't feel the need for the right-handed center fielder all that much. So I'm not sure what to make of that. I don't think the Luis Robert move is really intriguing. I think a Kevin Pillar could make a lot of sense. I don't think it would cost all that much. And I think that the Orioles have shown to be adept at making trades with the Angels, that maybe they're better at identifying talent in the Angels. So maybe you'd be able to slip something by them that you feel more comfortable with than some other teams. So that's kind of my read right now. Skubal and some random change uh, in the bullpen. I believe in the Orioles' ability to kind of make relievers out of nowhere. I do think a rookie could come up like McDermott and make an impact. I think Suarez moving back to the bullpen would be great. So I would say Skubal plus a back end rotation piece like a Montas or a Paxton or something like that feels sufficient. And then you go into the playoffs with Burns, Rodriguez, and Skubal as your three. That feels pretty great. And then a bullpen that's been improved by Suarez moving back. You get some sort of ancillary piece, and then maybe a rookie's come up and kind of caught lightning in a bottle. That's what I would opt for. And I think you're gonna have to part with a Basayo and a Kerstad, and then beyond that, it's gonna be lower level pieces that you probably feel better about. And I think that still leaves the minor leagues in a pretty good state. You still have Mayo, you still have Holiday. You just did a draft class. You still have Bradfield. Like you still have a lot of big names that the Orioles should still be really excited about. And it also sets you up for 2025 to feel pretty good about going into 2025 with at least Skubal and Rodriguez. And then, of course, there's free agency to come where you can sign some guys to feel even more secure in your rotation. So that's my read on it. Michael Ice, I don't, to my knowledge, think is a listener here, so he might not go for it. But that's what I would opt for. All right. That's going to wrap up the show. I do want to remind everybody that you can follow us on social media at The Warehouse Pod on Twitter and Threads. Go to YouTube, give us a subscription there. It's free. Just search for us. The Warehouse Podcast will pop up. You can see me and all my screen shares for this episode. Also, please, if you are listening to it in audio version, subscribe to us there as well and give us a rating, a 5-star or a thumbs up or whatever the best possible rating is there. That would be huge. Lets us get to other people. We'd really appreciate that. And if you want to reach out to us, give us an email, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. And, tell a friend if you like what you hear. Hey, there's this cool Orioles podcast called The Warehouse Podcast. Check them out. They do really cool stuff 2 times a week. That's our dedication for the season is 2 episodes per week. And we've stuck to that so far. And we've only got, 2.5 months left, maybe more with the World Series. So we're going to stick to it as we've done so far. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. Thanks for sticking around through all my ramblings and chatting. And yeah, we'll be back here in a couple days to recap this series with the Marlins and any major moves that might happen. But that's all I got. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.